Grand Power Mark 23s are finally starting to hit the US. We have the Q100, which is the duty-sized-ish, I guess you could call it, striker-fired gun. Tabletop review coming up. We'll take a look at what's in the box. Notes from the manual. Fit, finish, and features, of course. We'll do some trigger talk, a little comparison with the older generation Q100 in case those happen to be still available while you're looking at this or you want to know what has changed. Of course, field strip it, take a look at the insides, chamber fitment, all the things that we normally do here on GBGuns. Coming up next. Open up the box, and it is the same box they've been using. There is a little tab for a lock, but it's not super strong. Like, I would not use these cases for airline travel, but it's better than a cardboard box. Open it up, you see right away that we get 3 magazines, 15 rounders. These are the same magazines that were in the Mark 12s, and it is the same magazine shape, body size, etc. for all of the 15 round 9mm Grand Power models, which means it's pretty easy to find them. And if you're like me and you have a bit of an addiction, you like trying different models within the same line, you end up with lots of magazines because you're getting 3 at a time. We also get a total of 4 back straps, and while they appear similar to the older generation, the texture has changed quite a bit. Up top, we have, of course, a cleaning brush and federally mandated lock. We have 2 additional front sight posts of slightly different height. Speaking of, while I'm here, the front sight cut on Grand Power pistols is essentially a CZ75 cut, but as you can see, there's that little pin there, roll pin, that's helping lock the sight in place. So if you want aftermarket sights, aside from those made by Grand Power, you can try a CZ75 front sight post, but you will need to grind or cut a groove in it for that pin to lock it in place. Otherwise, you could try like Rockset or something like that, but that's at your own risk. The other bit we get up top, so if the manual is this baggie of screws, nuts, and 4 optics plates. That's right, it comes with all 4 options, so you don't have to worry about picking the right optic. Chances are you have an optic that would fit. The way this mounting system works, if I flip this over, this one is, you can see there's a socket in there for the nuts. The nut rides in the back. You're screwing the optic to the plate with that nut locking in place, and the plate to the gun. So it's kind of a nice way of stacking and sharing the shear load that optics face while reciprocating. It's kind of an interesting, unique way to do it. And there are the different nuts and Allen keys. I'm going to carefully put these back in the bag before they disappear on me. Also up top was the manual, and longtime viewers know I go through the manuals because I see them as a sign of how much the company cares about you, the consumer. The better the manual is, chances are, if you are literate, the better time you're going to have with the gun. So it's a simple reassurance. And speaking of, it does have the warranty card in it in 5 languages. It's 2 years for plastic parts and surface treatment, 5 years for other parts, and warranty here in the US is handled by the importer, Global Ordnance. It's a full color manual, which is rather nicely done. There's full specs of all the models. Don't worry about pausing. If you check the pinned comment or head on over to gbgunsdepot.com for the full review, that's where you can see specs, pricing, all the ammo that will be tested in this gun, etc. The manual is mostly verbal, but thanks to that full color, we've got some nice sharp color images at a good scale. I think this is a pretty well done manual. Grand Powers are a bit different, and that has caused frustration for those who maybe don't acquire new skills the quickest. More on that when we get to the field strip, but don't worry, I'll show you how to do it. Before going too much into the gun, I want to cover what's new and different about the Mark 23 versus the Mark 12s. So what we have here is a quick, I guess you could say, lineage demonstration. All 3 of these are Q100s, 2 of them are Mark 12s, and 1 Mark 23, and they were based on the K100. This was the core model of Grand Power, hammer-fired, as most of their guns are. And the hammer-fired trigger is incredible. Watch this. That's the wall. Break. Reset. Break. Very nice, and a very smooth double action trigger. This happens to be a decocker model. Unfortunately, those aren't imported anymore. But this was what became the Q100 when they moved to striker fired. Many years ago, I did a comparison of the two guns because when you go striker fired and you don't need room for that hammer, you actually end up with a longer slide. So you get a longer sight radius. You also don't have the mainspring being armed during the recoil process. So the recoil impulse is a little bit different, and I tried to test and verify and find comparisons. I might do that again with the new Mark 23s, but that's the origin story of the Q100. But I'm going to show you what happened. Their first striker, and this is an early model with the curved trigger. This trigger is fantastic. I would never carry it, and I'll show you why. It also got discontinued and changed rather rapidly. We have the safety dingus in the middle, which is good because that's it. That's the brake. There's no... You get a defined reset, but there's no defined wall. It just kind of pulls through. It would be a good trigger for someone who's always shot double action and never shot a striker-fired gun before, if they also have a fine and well-disciplined trigger finger, because it's very, very light, and you don't know when the wall is. It's just you pull and it goes. So Gram Power quickly stopped that and came up with this flat face trigger, which is how you can identify the newer generations. It's got the safety dingus in the middle. Basically, defeating the safety takes you to the wall, and that has a defined brake. And it's also very short and light. It's one of the better striker-fired triggers out there on the market. It's just, since not many people know about Gram Power, they don't know about these things. So, since we're down here, trigger talk on the Mark 23. Is it any different? This gun's never been fired, so it's not broken in. Safety dingus works. Deactivating the safety takes us to the wall. Tiny bit of creep, a good brake, reset. Is a little more moderate, but is right back to the wall. There's no additional take up after it resets. Excellent trigger, probably going to be fun to shoot. That out of the way, let's talk about the differences between the Mark 23s and the Mark 12s. As of the date that I'm filming this, both models, both generations are still on the market. Now obviously the Mark 23, which was released in 2023, our subscribers saw that. We went over to Gram Power in Slovakia and shot some of the early production models. It's just taken a year to get to the US. So these are currently on the US market. They're new. They're replacing these, which are still on the US market while supplies last. Now when it comes to the generational changes, there were two changes that everybody asked for and one change no one was expecting. The first of which is a texture change. As I come in on these grips, they look the same, but when you get up close, you can see, hear my fingernail on that versus this. This has been enriched, and it's enriched just in the major contact points, leaving it to still be comfortable in the hand and comfortable to carry, and it's extra sharp along here, which is where your fingers grab. It's pretty smartly done. That has been enhanced both on the frames themselves and on all four of the back straps that you get. The other big change, of course, is the optic system, which I showed you. Now YouTube won't show me how, or won't let me show you how that happens, but remove those screws, install the optic to the plate that you want to use, and install that on the gun. Pretty easy. The third change is kind of a shocking one that I wasn't expecting. You notice these cool, stylish deep cuts on the slide that are no longer the big round slide like it used to be, and that's because the action type has changed a little bit. Now, Gram Power is famous for its rotating barrel action, which I have found to reduce recoil. I say it's kind of like a half caliber. It isn't quite fair with 9mm because most 380s are blowback and that makes them vicious, but it definitely shoots softer. You have less mass shifting backward and forward in the gun because the barrel is not doing the rear down, up, forward, slamming back and forth, which is moving weight. It's just rotating. Previously, we had this nice shiny cam surface here, which rotated on this roller bearing here. Now we have this cam surface, and it's rotating on this pin. And this pin does rotate, so we've got a roller bearing type of setup in there. And as a result, we ended up with a lower profile barrel and these interesting locking lugs. This top lug, which is part of what sticks in that top groove in there in the slide, and why we have this shape available to us, helps keep the barrel from rotating at all when it's unlocked. Now I've shot, I don't know, at least 10, maybe 15,000 rounds. That might even be a conservative number of 3-gram power pistols, and never had an issue while firing. But for disassembly and reassembly, this makes it a whole lot easier because it's staying in place. You see that barrel versus the older barrel, we have different profiles, different thickness, and so slightly different weight, which is something that I'm kind of curious about. I didn't see a huge difference on the K models. Let's see if we do on the Q model, just for the fun of it. First things first, the reciprocating mass, the slide, the part that causes most of your felt recoil. The old Q, 12.1 ounces, and the Mk23, 11 ounces. So we've lost more than an ounce off the slide, which is nice since guess what a red dot weighs? Usually about an ounce to ounce and a half. And just for the fun of it, our barrel had been 3.7 ounces and is now 3.5 ounces. So the new Mk23 Q100s are indeed lighter than the old ones, and lighter in the places that can impact the way a gun feels. I will definitely have to do a side-by-side shooting impression test video of these separate from the regular review. Now on to our regular tabletop review. First things first, do we get magazine ejection or release? Do this by testing with the slide all the way back, flip the gun upside down and push the button. And we got a little bit of a kick. So we have ejection. It's not a whole lot, but it is pushing it out. That's thanks to the metal body on a polymer frame. The witness windows, this is my one complaint on Gram Powers. It's on the side for the European full, medium, low, and then you have this nice orange follower to let you know when you're empty. I wish they were on the back, but it is what it is. With it slide locked open, we can also take a look at our ambi controls. Does the right side slide release work without struggling? Yes, it does. This is something I've found to be a signature of Gram Power pistols. Unlike a lot of them, those of you that are either lefty or like to train with both hands have probably noticed that while ambi slide releases have become popular, they're not always easy to use on this side. And part of that is because the actual catch is happening over here. And so when you're applying force here, there's a chance for torsion inside there. You're losing some of your mechanical energy in twisting something versus just dropping the lever, and that can make it tough. Gram Powers are different because they have a CNC billet stainless steel chassis inside. That's right, the same chassis concept that has become popular with modular guns. Gram Power's been doing it for 20 years with billet stainless versus stamped sheet metal. However, due to Slovak laws, every part, major component has to be serialized and controlled, and so they never saw an advantage to the modularity type setups that we see on other guns today, and it's kind of unfortunate because I would have loved to see modular frames take off for Gram Power guns, but it doesn't make sense for Gram Power in Slovakia, who the US is one of 44 countries that has these guns, to fight their own laws for one market. Another thing, and those of you that have seen some of our factory footage, Gram Power is a defense contractor, a defense weapons maker, not just a commercial market handgun maker. And so despite the US being a mecca of handguns right now, it's still not the whole market that Gram Power is concerned about. So we're just lucky to get the benefits of military contracts and developments as civilians over here in the US. All right, off of that. Up front, our slide to frame fit is very, very rigid. We have a little bit of tilt, but I can't get any shifting going on. You notice we have a little bit of relief cut hair here to make reholstering a little bit easier and safer. Stainless barrel protrudes just a wee bit. Underneath the rail, we have a single slot of pick. I used to criticize that until I came to realize that if there's another slot here, there aren't many items that would fit here that you would want on a gun of this size anyways. This is a duty size gun. If you're going to put a light on it, it can be a duty size light. like it just makes sense. Additionally, they have the serial plate here, so that would make a difficult thing to add another slot. We have texturing on the front of the trigger guard, as well as the little hook for that European style support finger forward. I've tried that. I'm curious if any of you guys have. I know Jerry Mitchlick and some world champions shoot that way. It didn't work for me. I don't know if that's because, I'm assuming that's because I simply haven't done it enough. Our flat face trigger, which does have some serrations on it. You guys already saw the trigger talk to know how this thing feels. We do not have a double undercut on the trigger guard, but you might notice that there's an upward angle here, and that works very much like a double undercut in building your support hand underneath it and allowing a little more space. Excellent radiusing underneath here, good and broad, no sharp spots, and you can see we have shielding for the magazine release on both sides. The texturing on the front strap is the way it should be, horizontal, to resist rotation energy of the gun. And we've got plenty of texture down here. It is not aggressive, like it's not going to shred your belly, but it's definitely going to hold on more than the Mark 12s did, and I appreciate that. Having shot the Mark 12s in rain, in snow, in desert sun, I've been sweaty and I've been wet at shooting ground powers, and sometimes it's a little bit slippery. Fortunately, the ergonomics for me has been what helped hold on to the gun. I'm just able to get such a good wrap on the gun, and that's in part thanks to these three-sided back straps, of which there are 4, and I strongly recommend you try them. Run the same drill with each of the 4 without even looking at what it says on the back as far as sizing or any of that kind of stuff, and you might be surprised. Even across the ground powers that I had out earlier, I have different back straps on them because for some reason with that gun, that back strap worked for me. It's not a I need a large or I need a medium. It's what works for your hand. At the bottom here, we do have the slight toe kick thing that's been on ground powers the whole time, but as what's his name? Zelensky? No. I'm trying to remember the name of the Project Samurai has pointed out and popularized. When you are shooting with a dot, which this is ready for, oftentimes the error is a vertical axis error, and oftentimes that's easiest to control with pinky pressure. So having that hook there gives you a great spot to apply or release a little bit of pinky pressure to raise or lower the angle of the dot in the window. They were doing it before they knew it was a thing, but now it's a thing. No, not much beveling, but a little bit of rounding here for inserting the magazine. I've already beat to death my theory on double stack single feed mags, so don't worry, I'm not going to repeat it there. Slide to frame fit in the back. Very tight, a little bit of side to side, but as you can see, I mean, that is a fitment that some 1911 makers seek after and charge extras for. Speaking of, if you've seen our factory footage, you'll see that the slides and their chassis are mated and paired by a smith who goes through and tries them and finds the best fit. Even though it's all CNC machined with incredible tolerances, they still test fit the stuff before the gun goes together, which is usually considered a premium feature versus your standard factory. The sights are 3-dot sights. They're not quite white. It's kind of a yellowish color, which is interesting. You do have the ledge for racking off of a rock or something for my army buddies, a belt or something for civilians. And then on the right side we have all of our controls. This plug here is admittedly a kind of a disappointment for me. That plug is where the safety lever would go on a safety model equipped. I understand saving the cost and all of that, of instead of making a whole nother mold for a frame, this is the same frame that goes on the K models as far as the plastic part. So that's just a way of plugging it. In fact, you can even see the fire indicator there sticking out. Kind of a bummer. Kind of wish it wasn't there, but I have yet to have a plug fall out or cause me any issues in all of my years of shooting. This is now my 28th Grand Power model, so I'm not worried about it. Now that we've gone over all of that, let's field strip this thing and take a look inside the Q100. Field stripping ground powers has always been a topic of conversation because it's different. Unless you've done a Walther PPK or a Makarov or one of the guns where the slide has to come back, up, and off, forward, it seems weird. You have to pull against that spring, fully compressing beyond where a shot normally compresses. So you need to have a good hold on the gun while you pull down on these takedown levers on both sides. I get a good hold on the gun by holding onto the trigger guard with my middle finger here, and then pull down, and then we bring the slide back up, forward, and off. And it's field stripped. One thing I noticed is, unlike the K100, we have a captured spring on the Q100, and it is a different spring with a lot more coils. I theorize, and I'm curious how many of you gunsmiths, real or home gunsmiths, would agree with me that that's because since we don't have a mainspring to arm like on a hammer-fired model, this spring needs to be stronger. Just a theory. But now that we're here, we can take a look at that nice, beefy billet chassis. And that chassis, aside from, ooh, cool chassis, does something that I've come to really appreciate on ground powers, and that is it makes for very consistent trigger pulls. You see, because these pins are not wallowing in the polymer over time, loosening up, shifting, all that kind of stuff. They're going through this steel chassis, which holds them in place very well. And so 1,000 rounds, 5,000 rounds, the triggers get smoother, but they retain the same predictability that they do when they're new. You can also see that we've got a nice, big, shiny, if the camera will focus, feed ramp in there, and that's because ground powers feed much lower than you need on a Browning action. Notice there's no feed ramp on the bottom of the barrel. It's because the barrel's not having to drop to pick up a round like it does on a Browning action. The barrel stays right there in line, resting right on top. Pull this out. Get it set up for you. See, there's the cam groove. So it sits just like that. And that is pretty straightforward feeding. That's one of the things that adds to the reliability of these. It also, I theorize, is part of how you can get away with a smaller ejection port, because there's a lot less variable in these things. Just more precise machine, if you will. And you might notice we have some initials stamped back here. That is something that belongs to the guy that put the thing together. Talk about... Oh, Tactikitties are disagreeing in the background. Sorry about that. Talk about accountability for the one who assembled this. If there's an issue with this gun and it goes back, that dude is getting a call. You can take a look inside of our slide, and you can see if it's not needed, it's not there. Nice deep pockets there of steel removed. And then we have that deep groove up top where the barrel slides in. Speaking of barrel, here's our piece, and a little fun kind of token is that the profile, these lugs, somewhat reminiscent of an AK barrel, or an AK bolt. And the cam path is also somewhat reminiscent of an AK, but this is a 9mm pistol. We've already talked about the profile and weight differences. You notice that we've got chamfering all the way around to help with feed. We'll do our chamber fitment and check. I'm using some Liberty Civil Defense. It's nice stuff. The nickel coating helps with corrosion resistance, great for stuff like my videos, but also for carry, because it means the round's not going to go bad on you from sweat, etc. Drop it in, listen for plunk, which we got. Make sure it can turn freely, which it can. And then we look to see how much of the brass is supported beyond that edge, and the answer is all of it. 100% supported chamber, which is excellent. These things are built around 124 NATO ammo. Fortunately, so far, that hasn't meant that they're ammo picky on soft American ammo, but having that fully supported case is excellent. Round drops out nicely, so we know we have a clean, smooth chamber. Really beautifully made barrels. The reason why I use ground powers in my ammo tests is because I know their barrel specs are, well, the tightest that I've ever heard of. No one else has been willing to tell me their specs. So to reassemble, when the serial number's in the window, we know that everything's back together. Turn it a little bit so the barrel can slide forward. And see, it no longer can rotate thanks to that groove in there. That's what I was talking about, and it makes it a little bit easier to reassemble than the Mark 12s. Then we're going to have to, in one fell swoop, pull the slide all the way to the rear and kind of seat it down and let it go forward. This can be challenging to do with my filming setup, I always give it a try. No promises. I did it just a second ago. I think I put my thumb in here, or I held like this so I could really push. And I'm going to come get that spring in there, all the way back, down, and let it go forward. There we go. That was easier than I thought. Everything works nicely. When we get this to the range, you will see absolute first shots through the gun. Yes, I did pre-shoot these a year ago over in Slovakia, but that was different. I was jet lagged, maybe a little hungover. We were shooting in a converted Fallout bunker with 124 NATO ammo. Fallout bunkers don't have the same sound and percussion deadening setup that a typical indoor range might. So it made the guns feel and sound, and the whole thing was much more intense, plus the jet lag, etc. Not my best shooting performance. What you'll see on the range is my home range American ammo. We'll shoot at least 11 loads through it. We'll test the magazines. I'll do some sights and trigger control, some practical accuracy, and then give you concluding thoughts. And as always, for the full review, details, specs, where to find one, all that kind of stuff, check the pinned comment or just sign up for our email list at gbgunsdepot.com, and that way you get to see the review first, and you'll be seeing the videos before they're public here on YouTube. Thank you guys for 9 years of support, and we'll see you on the range.